least branded.
Hello. Welcome to
everybody.
what feels like the war zone.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a
Yeah.
beard, and I didn't get to shower today.
I forgot we were doing FaceTime Live, so I've been calling everybody in our tribe, and if you haven't heard from me, you will, at least over the next week or two.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Like, I'm on day 3 of homeschooling, and it feels like day 300. It's God bless our teachers. That's all I'm gonna say. It's like, maybe my kids are better for them and they listen better to the teachers, but they sure don't listen to me. Like, we're not doing a lot. We're just trying to keep them in the groove and expose the stuff, and it takes time and a lot of patience.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we're here. We're surviving, as we're sure many of you are, right? Like, Austin just yesterday was at midnight. The shelter in place went into effect, and we've actually been sort of sheltering in place for the most part since spring break, at least. So going on our second week, and in some ways it's cool. Like, we've really it's hard to get work done. I mean, I know we were talking last night how much we wished it was just the two of us, because we would be so efficient and so effective at getting things done.
We'd be more productive, but we are getting time to play with the kids.
Yeah, that's the part that's really beautiful.
I'm learning to play Nintendo. It's pretty good.
Turns out I'm pretty good at Mario Kart 8.
Yeah.
Things we would never in a million years do. In fact, we didn't have a Nintendo until the coronavirus. That was not in our plan. That was going to live at the grandparents' house. But
I may become a gamer now.
Yeah. I'm going to say, with your skills, you've got a ways to go.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah. If I can beat you at Mario Kart 8, we're in trouble.
Well, that's not the game that.
Yeah. Okay. So we digress. The whole point for today, for Calls with Paul, is, well, we just want to reach out. We wanted to say hi. We wanted to see everybody again. And two, we wanted to talk a little bit about what else? The coronavirus and the potential impacts on the Austin real estate market. Granted, everything that we say and that we're doing changes sort of minute by minute and day by day. As the government rules change, we get more clarification and guidance. That changes. And so we're trying to stay abreast of that. We are masterminding with our colleagues across the nation on a pretty much a daily basis, hearing what's happening in places that were dealing with this earlier, like Seattle, and kind of just keeping up with it that way. But Paul, you've been on quite a few conference calls and really digging in. You know, you've been doing this for 25 years. 26.
Yeah.
Time flies. And you reminded me that you have actually lived through more than one recession.
4.
Not 4.
Or 3. We had, so I got in the 90s, and that was a downer, like right when I got in. And then we had, so that's 1. And then we had 9/11, that's 2. And then we had 2008, that's 3. And this one, which we almost everybody agrees that this is a recession, that's 4.
Okay, well,
I was right.
You're just really old, is what that means.
Yeah, that means I've lived a long time.
Yeah, but you've learned, right? Like, you've learned what we need to do as a business to survive a recession in real estate, and kind of what it looks like for people, and what it means for Austin. I mean, it's funny because you've got over 12,000 agents in Austin, and a lot of these people have never been through a recession. As real estate agents, they've never survived a downturn. They don't really know what that means or how to adjust their business. So tell us a little bit about some of the lessons. Like, is today's economic situation similar to what most people remember most recent history from 2008, when we sort of had the housing bubble burst?
Right. Probably not.
Okay.
This is a different ballgame. So in 2008, we had some structural issues with the financial system that caused the subprime market to do all kinds of. I'm not going to pretend like I really understand all of it, but that was a system-wide failure. This is more of an event, and what I keep the way I'm running it in my head is the world caught a cold, and we're sick right now, but we're going to get better. We'll be better soon. We'll go back to work. Maybe we'll be healthier for it in some ways. I think there's going to be some beautiful things that come out of this, like employers are going to get really comfortable with work from home, and employees too. Like, that's what I'm hearing. Sure, like less traffic on the street. Well, it's just a very different ball game. I think we're having some technical problems.
Sorry, just on Instagram.
Yeah. Hey, Roger. How you doing, man? Hey, Becca.
Yeah, some of those things from 2008, right? People's housing, they were doing things. Roger's asking about mortgage rates and that the treasuries are posting negative rates. We talked a little bit about this last week, but you want to dig into that?
Yeah, sure. Hey, great question, Roger. We think that they'll go as low as about 3%, maybe a little 3 to 3.5. It just depends on how fast we get in there buying mortgage-backed securities. That should bring the 10-year Treasury down, make investors feel real good about that investment. But I'd look for, 3 to 3.5 being where it ends up.
They don't go in lockstep. So everybody gets confused that the Fed rate cuts directly translate into a mortgage rate cut. That just helped me here because I don't want to misspeak, but they don't go hand in hand. They really vary, and the banks then have lower rates. That rate's going to be for the consumer. And when that first rate drop happened, so many people went in for refis and purchases, the banks kind of got overloaded. And so they slowed down. So even though the Fed did that big rate cut, God, I've lost track of time. Was that a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
No, it all kind of blends together.
Because banks were sort of backlogged. They weren't jumping on it. They were slowing the roll. And I think as they get caught up, we can start to see it go down. But it's not one Fed cut results in a point down for mortgage rates and that kind of thing.
They're very different animals. So the Fed rate that's the rate that they charge to lend to other Feds.
Right.
Like the Dallas Fed and the New York Fed and all these Feds. So that's the rate that they lend to them, and then they turn around and lend money to the bank. So that's one step up in interest rates, and then it goes out another layer. So that's why we don't really see it getting below 3.
Right, and a lot of people are going, they're heading to more of the safer bets than they are to some of the mortgage stuff. So let's talk a little bit about the housing market in Austin, kind of going back to that 2008 thing. In 2008, so many people had seen appreciation based on the fact that they were borrowing money, they were taking out home equity loans, things like that. Now, the appreciation we're seeing in Austin is really attributed to demand and supply and demand. Yeah. And so in a recession, people aren't going to lose their equity really like they did. You tell me, this is your thing, right?
So,
but it's not going to, because we have this supply and demand issue, people aren't necessarily going to be as upside down as they would as they were in 2008.
What happened, before 2008, we were using home equity loans as a credit card.
Yeah.
We quit doing that when we came out of the recession. So what we're seeing on a national level is that there's people have more equity in each one of their homes. Hey, Joshua. Hey, Don.
Yeah, and so the thing of it, I think is interesting is looking at in the past several, the 2008 drop, home prices did drop in 2008. In Austin, though, keep in mind they only dropped about 3% because we had such a healthy market. And nationally, in 2007, home prices depreciated 4.6%. In 2008, home prices depreciated about 4.1%. Now compare that to the stock market, because a lot of people also think, the stock's falling, housing must be in a bad situation. Yeah. In 2000, between 2007 and 2009, that market correction that we saw, the S&P 500 dropped over 51%. Right? 51%. Yeah. Whereas the worst drop we saw in housing nationally was 10%. And then locally in Austin, it was about 3%. So that's just, if it gives you any sort of comparison, it's a very different sort of cycle. The other thing is, you mentioned it feels emotional, like our housing market and the economy caught a cold. Yeah. And a lot of people have drawn parallels between this and the dot-com crash and the 9/11 crash of go back from 2008 back to 2000, 2001, 2002. In that particular cycle, what did the housing market do nationally? It went up, didn't it?
Yeah, so we had appreciation after the 9/11 thing, which is surprising when you look back on it, because in the moment it felt really scary. And we're seeing the same thing in Austin right now. The supply-demand curve hasn't changed. We still have very few homes on the market. I think we're at a month and a half. that are available, and we have probably 10 buyers for every home. So that's not changing.
Yeah, like for comparison's sake, because you think it's more like that emotional, like people are saying there's going to be a steep V, right? No one knows for sure. We certainly don't know for sure.
I really expected there to be some opportunity coming with this crisis.
There could be more houses available.
But, we had that meeting with Mark Sprague, a local Austin economist, and like from all indicators, it looks like prices will continue to go up, which is surprising.
So the steep V just basically means we're dropping, we're having this pause, at least in real estate, and they think that when we start to rebound, we're going to rebound quickly, which is kind of more like what you see in these times of crisis. Unlike 9/11 and the dot-com crash, we actually have this big pressure on the healthcare system, and people are not even being allowed to work. They're being sent home, right? And only able to work remotely. Just again, for comparison's sake, the stocks dropped in 2002 by about 45% on the S&P 500. But in housing, we saw appreciation rates from 8.6 to 6.6 to back up to 8.5% appreciation nationally during the dot-com and 9/11 era. So again, while the stock market was tanking, housing continued to go up. Which all that really means is those folks. Hey, Andrew, and the Oldhams in California.
Hey, Sandy.
What that really means for people who are been kind of waiting to jump into the Austin market when the next recession hits, you may not see the prices go down quite as much as you had kind of hoped they would.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about more what you learned from the Austin economist Mark Sprague on that call earlier this week.
Yeah, it was really quite a surprise. What we're hearing is that we had 3 times the listings and 3 times the sales walking into the coronavirus, like the week prior. It's just been red hot. And if you look at past recessions, oddly, housing has gone up, usually not as fast as like what we're seeing right now, but been hotter. We're more diversified. We're still popular. What happens in almost every recession is demand doesn't go away. It just gets paused. I like to think of it as like a slingshot. You take the demand and you put it in a slingshot, and then you let it go, and you'll have a lot for homes. So,
I think you're telling me I should really enjoy seeing you now,
because
right. When this recovers, I'm not going to see you at all.
Yeah,
We've got a great question from our friend Harshal with Sago Homes, who's a fantastic
Hey,
builder
Harshal.
here in Austin. Does a lot of really cool stuff, especially in the Crestview area, if any of you are looking to build. And I've got to get closer because I can't read that far away.
Yeah,
but Harshal's question is, what do we think about the lack of ability to show homes right now? Even if there's a supply and demand, which we're definitely seeing,
Yep.
How does that structural constraint impact the market?
Yeah, no, great question, Harshal. I think you're going to see really no sales while we can't show homes. There may be some people out there brave enough to buy without seeing it. We certainly don't recommend that, but that's the part of the V. Like while we're all on lockdown, of course, we can't do anything with the economy. The fascinating piece to all this that I'm thinking about is like, okay, so next year when all this is passed, how are we going to qualify people when you have this big blank spot where a lot of people, especially unemployed or self-employed,
like us,
like us, and you, Harshal, and many others on the call. So that's my big question. But to answer your question, I think you're going to see no sales happen while we're on lockdown.
I'm gonna go a little bit of a different direction, right?
Yeah.
So we see things differently. So on this call, we actually had not a Compass person, but someone outside of Compass tell agents, well, if it was me, I'd still go show houses.
Yeah, you're going to have some.
Which was really bad advice, in my opinion. And it's inconsistent. The thing that's interesting is that we are going to take the stay-at-home order very seriously. We are not going to be going out and showing houses during this time. But there are going to be agents that buck the system. We are seeing houses continuing to go on the market as recently as yesterday.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people are going to start suddenly pulling those off the market, or they're just planning on kind of sitting and waiting. So you are going to have inconsistencies. You're going to have people and agents that are going to go out there and show anyway, despite the shutdown. Real estate is still allowed. So if you've got a deal in the pipeline and a realtor needs to do something for the, in order to move that contract forward, I think that's allowed. But in terms of generating new contracts and trying to generate new business, that's going out and being active is not permissible. We're definitely seeing the title companies make adjustments. Our stager just commented, hey, Lynn from Mambo, that she's extending all staging contracts for the entire time that we're sheltering in place. And so what a wonderful thing she's doing.
That's
she's
really
not
nice,
charging people, just giving people a little bit of breathing room so that when things are allowed to be shown, we can pick up again. And to that point, you called the Austin Board of Realtors yesterday and asked if they were going to do anything to try to even the playing field, right, to make sure that there are some the agents that are following the rules don't get penalized because they're not out there not showing, while other people don't follow the rules and continue to show homes. Yeah. And what they tell you?
They sent me to their website, which I haven't looked up.
Thanks, Abor. Really helpful.
My hope was that we'd turn the lock boxes off, but they can't do that. They don't own them.
So agents can still be putting lock boxes out there. And
at the end of the day, you're going to have people who follow the rules, people who break the rules, and I'm not in charge of any of that, so I'm just not going to worry about it.
So we were able to, for a while last week, Paul was showing in very cautious ways, taking a lot of precautions and measures, and we sent out a very lengthy blog post that includes some of this data if you're interested in it, about the recession data and things like that. But we're having to adjust. I mean, now that the stay-in-place order is in place, we're reaching out, we're talking to people, and we're trying to connect to everybody. Let's see. I'm trying to go back. Our friends in California says that the market here in California is still somewhat active. They're using virtual tours and photos and have put a few contingent deals under contract during the quarantine, and that their MLS is not tolling days, which is really interesting. And
that's cool.
Let's see. And they hope that keeps inventory up even if virtual tours. So for us, we were getting ready to get a lot of listings ready to go on the market. We currently have one on the market, and it does. I mean, when we market homes, I think this is just another advice for people who might be thinking about going on the market. There are realtors that do video, like the Oldhams out in California, and us. All of that.
Are they on the call?
They are.
Hey guys.
All of that is still in place. So the listings that we have currently out there have professional photographs. They have virtual tours. They have walkthrough tours. They have our 3 favorite thing videos. So you definitely want to have realtors that are able and experienced at doing video if you're planning on going on the market, so that you've got that as a way for people to see the property in a more detailed way, including Matterport or those 3D walkthrough tours and those kinds of things. So it's interesting to hear that. Another friend of ours, Grant, out in California, says that lots of sellers are already reaching out to him about future plans. And we too, we've got things that some people that are just pushing the pause button. I mean, they don't really want to go live on the market when there aren't people able to go physically see their houses. Harshal says, yes, he thinks we're right. It will be interesting to see how much more demand will happen after the order is lifted. Possibly a shift in seasonality to later in the year.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. I think we're going to have a spring market that comes in the 3rd and 4th quarter.
Right. And that kind of mirrors what Goldman Sachs is forecasting for the GDP. Yeah. This was back on the 17th, so it's a little bit old at this point. But, what we're seeing is that we think, that we're going to see some normalcy, that V, that Goldman Sachs is predicting that Q2 GDP will be down about 5%. That feels pretty conservative to me. But they're expecting that by Q3, things will start ramping up, that we'll start seeing positive GDP in about 3% range, and by Q4 we'll be up 4%. And so we do think things are going to stabilize. We do think that as people begin to sort of see an end in sight, I think if we could get an idea of really when things are going to peak. I know here in Austin they're talking about May 10th being a magic number. If we can and get some confidence that the health system is able to sort of manage the flow of sick people we think that we will see that normalcy. And we're definitely expecting that 2021 spring will be exceptionally hot. The other thing is if foreclosures. I mean, it's very interesting. We are very active right now in our neighborhood groups. We've got people who are renting, just to bring this in a real world way, that are saying that their apartment complex is going to charge them $50 a day every day that they're late on their rent. And for them, $400 late fees was a major, major impact. And in Austin, and I think elsewhere, we're seeing now that they're slowing foreclosures. The Fed is declaring no foreclosures or evictions on anything that was insured by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, right, for the next 60 days,
Yep.
potentially longer. We're seeing local communities and city councils do those kinds of things as well. But to this gentleman's point that lives in our neighborhood in an apartment, that's not impacting the late fees. That's saying they're not going to evict him, but he's still being charged late fees.
Yeah, it's just deferred.
Yeah.
Just means that they're not going to start an eviction until those 60 days have passed. It doesn't mean you get a free ride. Like there's some confusion out there. But before I forget to say it, I just have to say I love what the Fed is doing. Like this preemptive, like getting ahead of the ball and just doing smart things that we didn't do in 2008 to prevent housing from going down and to make it easier for us all to recover. It's just really. It's beautiful to see. Yeah. It's comforting, like as an investor and a real estate guy. You know, the part of the reason why we're making all these calls out to y'all is to talk and make sure you're okay, and also make sure you understand that your real estate portfolio is intact. You know.
Cool. Home prices during the last 5 recessions we've talked about just generally, just to give you an idea. You know, home prices 3 out of the last 5 recessions actually went up.
That's fascinating.
Right. And so if you're considering, you know, one, if you're worried about your personal home equity, we should expect to see those prices continue to go up. Crystal ball.
We don't know. We might say something different next
week. So we talked a little bit about the interest rates. So my next question is this the right time to try to buy or sell or invest, assuming that, of course, the stay-in-place orders get lifted and people are able to get out there? What do you think?
Well, once we get past lockdown, absolutely, I think it's a good time to buy. You know, I think earlier is always better in real estate. Time is your friend. And if it's a little bit scary, than when everybody's excited. You know, one of the things I've noticed over my career is when I tell everybody all the time, buy in December, or buy in September, buy there when the market is kind of going down because there's a price decrease that
about
happens.
6 to 8% usually.
Yeah, just very naturally it occurs every single year. But what happens is after July, you'll start seeing in your real estate feed every year, price reduced. This year will be different, but it becomes very difficult for buyers to buy when they see price reduced.
Yeah, I think you've got to have a certain amount of fortitude to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be people that don't want to capitalize on other people's misfortunes right now. And so there may be people that hold back. And then there are going to be people that don't, people that jump in anyway. Here, we mentioned this last week, but we had out-of-state buyers that were going to be coming in to look at buying properties. And of course, they've all canceled their trips at this point.
Like people, it's a neat time. Like if you don't have to compete with people from California. No offense, Californians, you know I love you.
Yeah.
But you don't with people coming in from out of state.
So when we see the orders lifted, when homes are able to be shown, you're going to want to make sure that you're properly. And if you're looking at getting in, that's a really good time to get in when we're able to start show homes again, because it's going to take a while for people from out of state to come in and have that competition. Although, of course, virtual showings and things like that are happening, but we think it'll take a little while for that to ramp up. Last week, your multi-unit opportunities were up. Are you still seeing?
Like all of a sudden, most of them went active contingent. We saw a bunch of withdrawals. I think people getting ready for the stay in place kind of thing caused various reactions. I don't know what the active contingents were really about, other than what an active contingent is people still but they have an offer on the deal that if something happens, then